do a little opening here. All right, welcome everybody to part 2 of our epic conversation with Bad Kids Press and Comicazi and the wines that they have created based on their comics. Part 1 was with Bob Howard, and today we have special guest Roel, I'm sorry, Roel Torres. Is it Torres or Torres? How do you like to pronounce your last name? Torres. So Roel Torres, and we will get started right after we hear 14 seconds of opening music.
Every time we hear that song, it makes us want to do a jig.
Absolutely. I do. We did a live stream yesterday, and while it was playing afterwards, I was still doing this when we got back on camera, and I was just like, I have to do this every time that damn thing plays. It's
catchy.
It's catchy, and it's just that little like mindless like doo, 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 doo. And I just do it every time, and I listen to it all the time. You think I'd get sick of it?
It sets a tone. It's nice and upbeat, and it leads us into the conversation. Everyone's in a good mood, so perfect choice.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. It's funny. That was my second choice of a song. I first picked a song that was like this super classy, super low key acoustic guitar thing, and I played it for everyone, and they were like, "Don't you want it to be a little more upbeat or like something with a little life to it?" And I was like, "Huh, okay." And then I came back with that, and everyone laughed out loud when they heard it. And I was just like, and they were like, that's the one you got to play. And I'm like, all right, fine.
It's always a mistake to go with super classy, because then you have to meet those expectations. So like you want diminished expectations, and then you want to overperform and exceed them. And everyone's like, "You're much better than I expected." So, good call.
Thank you. And I think maybe it is the music, because a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're a lot more fun. You're a lot more you can talk about these things more than we thought you could." And I'm like, thanks, I think.
So historically, when I started working after I graduated college, my first like 3 or 4 job interviews, they would ask me questions on the job. And one of the things that I would say to them in every job interview, first 3 or 4 job interviews, I got offered these jobs. I said to them, "I'm not qualified for this position. I have no background, no training, no experience in this field. But I learn on the job. I'm a pretty quick study." And I said to them, "If you hire me, I'll work hard and I'll figure it out." And I'm like, this worked out every time, because I knew they were already recruiting me. They were already interested in me. They already saw my resume. They already saw my CV. They knew I didn't have a background or training. So it seemed like I was being modest, and it seemed like I was, trying to play things down and being humble. But instead, I was just like, "You already know I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just telling you what you already know." But now it makes it seem like I'm keeping expectations low. And if anything ever went poorly, which it didn't, thankfully, but if it went poorly, I go, "You guys knew this when you hired me. I have no idea what I'm doing. This is your fault." Like, I was completely transparent and blatantly honest about the fact that I was not prepared for this job, and you still hired me anyhow. So that's on you.
It's a shame too, because I feel like that has largely gone the way of the dodo these days, that old school way of like getting hired for things where they're just like, "Oh, you're here and you're interested, and and you're smart, and we like you, and we like your personality, and you're professional enough because you have a resume." That was kind of all it took. And now we're in this sort of like world of hyper specialization where everyone's looking for that, like, not just that you do X, but you do X in this explicit industry, in this explicit niche. And if not, the chances of them still being interested in you, unless you're already friends with them or something like that, and you've got an in, is very rare. And it's a shame, because I've had a kind of sound from the sound of it, from what you just said. I think I've had a similar, just very meandering career path where it's going where I've been interested in. And, if something wasn't for me, because sometimes you think there's a dream job, and then the job part of it is kind of disillusioning. And you're like, "Oh, maybe I don't want to do this for a living. What's on the outskirts of this that's a little more interesting, or a little less, heavy handed, something that I might enjoy personally." And so you keep going off in different directions. And I was also closer to your generation of like, the world was still allowed for that. And I feel like it's really locking down more and more as we keep going.
So after I graduated from college, I wanted to work in publishing. I was an aspiring novelist. I'd written a novel, a manuscript. I'd given it to a literary agent. She was a great literary agent, Faith Hamlin from Sanford J. Greenberger, who had put multiple books on the New York Times bestseller list, and she'd read my draft, and she said, "I'm going to work with you." And I was working in publishing at that point. I spent 2.5 years in Viking Books, Penguin Books. It's now, I think they merged with Penguin Putnam, and now I think it's Penguin Random House. They've all merged. But I said, my true interests, my true loves are literature and novels and fiction and authors and books. And I spent 2.5 years working there. And I said, I hate all of this now, because what happened was that it became my full-time job, my full-time profession. And I spent all day working on other people's books and other people's writing and trying to sell it. And I saw just exactly how the process worked. And so after 2.5 years, I'm like, I'm not interested in any of this anymore. And, this was my dream. And I thought this was my dream job. And once I started working on it, I said, I'm not interested. But this is the advantage. This is the benefit of trial and error. So what happens is that you have an idea, you have opportunities, and you try them. Twice in my life, including most recently when I met my current wife again, we started dating and becoming, heavily involved romantically. I was a professional poker player, so I was playing poker to pay the bills.
W. McGuire.
So I'd worked at Harvard University, and then I stepped away and played poker. And I worked at Harvard University. I stepped away to play poker, and then I met my wife, and she was my girlfriend at the time, and she said to me, "Listen, if we're going to be serious, if we're going to do this long term and we're going to commit, you need to get a job that has health insurance." My wife has chronic health issues, and you need to be able to see doctors, which I thought was a very reasonable request for any life partner that she chose. And
right.
So poker sounds great, but it turns out poker doesn't have health insurance. It doesn't have benefits, So I went back to working at Harvard. But the truth was, I was happy to walk away from being a professional poker player, because as much as I enjoyed it and as profitable as it was, it turns out that when I spent all day doing it, I was miserable. It was such a terrible full-time job, and I was so happy. And I was just like, this is not how I want to spend my days. This is how I want to do things recreationally. If I'm hanging out with my friends, it's social, and I make a couple of dollars. And I'm like, that's about the level of activity I want in my poker life. When I was waking up every day, I was looking for any reason not to play poker, not to hit the poker table. But it's one of those things you never know until you give it a shot. And then when you try it, there are no regrets. And that's why I was happy. I was like, I might want to be a poker player. And I tried it, and I said, this is not the life for me. And you find your equilibrium, you find your balance, and you find out what things you want to do full-time as a job, and then what things you want to do part-time as a hobby or interest or as a passion. It doesn't have to be the way you pay the bills, and it doesn't have to be your day job, how you spend your days. So dream jobs can be very tricky, and they can be very deceptive. Like they can look great on the outside until you get deep into the machinery of things.
Right. Once you know how the sausage is made, it becomes a completely different story.
Agreed.
And the personalities that you have to deal with, depending on what it is. Me and Dallas are both he's on the East Coast right now, but we're both based on the West Coast. And we're both in like the LA, the film TV world and whatnot, which is also something that we've had to swim through to find our place in it, because the parts of it that we thought we would love the most were, the hurdles you had and the personalities you had to deal with, and the sort of workplace abuses you had to deal with, and knowing like, especially if you're a creative minded type, or you just love creativity in general. And then you see how decisions are made on that creativity, and you're like, oh, this is going to kill me. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can fight the good fight and stick it out,
You bring up a good point, Roel, about the machinery, because once that sort of artistic passion gets, sort of grounded down by the machinery, it's hard to kind of, reinvigorate that passion.
It is.
Been there a few times.
Part of the problem, right, is the terminology, which is that when you think about show business or the movie business or the comic book business or the publishing business, the second word is like business, you know?
Sure.
And what happens then is that you have the clash between artistic ambitions and capitalism and you know, profit motive and finances. And what happens is that it's very hard. People don't seem to understand without context in the modern day that most of the great artists throughout history were supported by patrons. They had financial patrons that would support them so that the artists were free to create. They weren't worried about financial strains and concerns and anxieties. They weren't saying, how do I pay the bills? They would have rich patrons like the Medicis or royalty. They would say, I will support you. I will give you money. You are now free to create and just be as artistic as you want. What happens in the modern day is that we live in a capitalist society where our products, our creativity then have to be sold and make a profit, or else a lot of people are like, we are not going to support this project. And that's a natural conflict where you go, do I want to make something that sells a lot, or am I interested in doing something that's artistic, that's a reflection of my vision, my inner creativity? And unfortunately, a lot of times, the people who are making it are not the ones who are selling it and profiting from it. And you know, it's going to be hard when someone goes, I'm investing millions of dollars into making this movie. I would want it to be profitable. And then so everyone who's working on that movie is sort of beholden to the financiers who are providing the economic and financial backing for it. And what happens then is how much compromise is there. And it's all a measure of degrees. The more money that's invested into something, the more pressure there is to recover that money. And it's a constant struggle. And so it's hard. Before I started working my current position, I spent 15 years as a Harvard financial officer. And my greatest takeaway from being a financial officer at Harvard, I was trained by the CFO of Harvard College, Sally Hensley at the time, who is now retired. And the biggest takeaway I took from it, where I was managing these $1 million budgets, is that it doesn't matter how much money you make if you spend more than what you're bringing in. And it doesn't matter how much money you spend if you bring in more than whatever so as long as your income,
as long as there is a
greater
profit
than your expenses. So like if you spend if you get $5 million making a movie, but you spent 10 million to make it, that was a bad idea. Now, if you make $1,000 from having made a movie, but you spend $5 to make it, you're profitable. And you can do that and you can repeat that process. And so what people need to do is they need to figure out exactly the economic framework and structure of how they're going to approach their projects. And so I say to them, listen, you can do whatever you want as long as you don't spend more than you're taking in. And if you keep your budgets manageable, you can work on any project and it will be self-sustaining. And so income should be greater than expense. And if it's the other way around and turned around backwards, if your expenses are greater than your income, it doesn't matter how great your product is. It doesn't matter how much money you're bringing in. If you're spending more than what you're taking in, it's going to be a disaster. And so that's hard. It's hard.
And to that end, Roel, what was that process going into this particular project for you in terms of budgeting and planning out the effort, and what was that like?
That's an excellent question. Thanks, Dal. So it's been a learning process, which is this. When I first started out making indie comics in 2007, I was an unknown commodity, which meant that I would have to pay creators work for hire page rates. And it would cost me money because I was building up my portfolio. If you're young and unknown and don't have a body of work, nobody wants to work with you. Here's what I've found interacting with other creators is that people are going to be willing to do it if you have something to offer them in return. Now, what are you going to offer them in return? The most obvious offer is financial, is money. If I pay you work for hire, you will come work for me. But sometimes it's other things. People are willing to work for exposure and to build up their reputation. And they say, if I can attach myself to this project, then, you know, at least I'll have a portfolio to show. And sometimes there's the barter where there's an, you know, it's mutually beneficial, where you say, I'm an excellent writer, but I can't draw. You're an excellent artist, but you can't write.
The skill
We
exchange.
should work together. Yeah. And so what happened was, at the start, nobody knew who I was, and I had confidence in my ability to write, but it's not enough to just tell people, random strangers who don't know you, I'm a good writer, trust me, let's work on this together. So 2007, I was funding my independent comic book projects. And then what happened, because then I had a body of work, I'd published multiple one-shots, you know, I had 3 or 4 books that I'd self-published. People were familiar with the fact that I was doing work. People started inviting me to contribute to anthologies. And what these anthology comics did meant that I would be contributing my work for free, but the artists, the letterers, the colorists were also contributing their work for free. So now it went from a process to where I was paying money to make comics. Suddenly it's break even. I'm not getting any money. I'm not profiting from it, but I'm also not spending any. So now I'm at a break even level, which means I can do that in perpetuity. You know, as long as I'm willing to contribute my labor, my sweat equity, there's no restraint on how many comics I can make with other collaborators who are willing to work with me for free. They'd seen my work. I was invited to these projects. I wanted to participate in these projects. They wanted to participate in these projects. We all mutually contributed our efforts with the understanding that this was a group project and nobody, you know, individually was taking in, you know, the benefits from it. We all were benefiting, you know, mutually and as a community. And then what happened was that once people started to see my work on these anthologies and my body of work grew, people started reaching out to me, and I was taking any project, no matter how lowball the page rate was, because I was like, even a lowball page rate is better than when I was doing it for free, or even worse, when I was paying to do things. So now people were paying me. I was just like, I've come around the other side. I've gone from paying money to make comics. Now people are paying me to make comics. I'm like, this is good. Like, and there were projects that I wasn't necessarily interested in, but I was like, you know, if they're paying you, that's how work, you know, is arranged. That's exactly. That's the arrangement. Is that
that's the economy of the scale.
Exactly. They pay you, and in return, you give them work. I didn't mind. So now it's all over the place. Now I have all of those funding models available to me depending on what projects I want to do, and it's circular. So what happens is that I will work on projects I'm not that interested in, that are not self-motivated, self-initiated, and people will pay me to do that. And then I take that money that I receive from those projects and I can finance the projects that I want to work on and seek out the collaborators that I want to work with, and I can give them money, work for hire. And then within all of that, as you know, sort of to maintain equilibrium, we also, I have now self-generated a community of collaborators who I've worked with for years. And we're all just happy to help each other and work on each other's projects. And every project is negotiable. So because all of these funding models exist, we can all just discuss terms, and we can say, how do we want to go about this? And really, I think what happens is that whoever initiates the project, they determine who comes on board, and whoever they're bringing on board has the opportunity to ask for compensation in whatever form they want. So if you're a writer and it's your dream project and you bring me on as the artist, it's fair for me to ask for compensation if that's what I would like. And conversely, if I'm the writer and it's my dream project and I've thought of all of this and I'm bringing people on board to work on it, they're allowed to ask me. And because I was a Harvard financial officer, you know, it's funny. We live in a society where things get awkward when people ask for money. And sometimes people don't want to say the page rate. They don't want to ask. They go, listen, would this be fair? And I just say to them, I don't have any problems with this. I don't have any problems asking for a fair page rate. I don't have any problems paying a fair page rate. And if you ask me for a page rate, all I can say is, yes, that seems fair and I can afford that. Or no, that's outside my budget. Like, you deserve it. You're very talented. You deserve every penny you make from your creative ability and your hard work. It's just outside of what I can pay, as a self-funded, self-financed indie creator. And a lot of times I'll open the conversations by going, here's what I can offer you, and let me know if you're interested, so that, they don't have to throw the first number out there. I know what a fair page rate is for art and for colors and for letters. And I initiate those conversations by going, hi, here's the project, here's the scope of it. 4 issues, 20 pages an issue, 80 pages total, and I can pay you this much for art. I can pay you this much for coloring. I can pay you this much for lettering. Here's the page rate. Let me know if you're interested. If they are, that's fantastic. It's wonderful. It's the best possible outcome. If they're not, I'm just like, I understand completely. And that's and that's fair. And that's not a problem. Like, folks get hung up on that. Folks often feel awkward asking for money, especially if it's friends or people that they know. And they're like, would you be willing to pay me for this? I'm like, I would be. Let's talk about this. What do you want out of the project? What are you getting out of it? And that's only fair. Look, if you're an artist, you're going to devote a lot of time. Project. It's incredibly time consuming. I know this because I do art on some of my projects as well. And if you're the artist, it's going to be a lot of time and effort, and we have to figure out what makes it worthwhile for you. And I don't know, everyone is motivated by different things. I've certainly done projects where I've just done it for the exposure, and I've done projects because I've done it because it's a passion of mine. I've contributed to charitable projects where I was like, this is a cause I very firmly believe in, that's very personal to me, and I want to get involved in it. And so you never know what any individual person's motivation is. It's up to them. Different people have different motives and different things that make them happy. So in my case, I've paid people, happy to do it, always happy to do it. One advantage of paying people work for higher rates is that you get to choose some really awesome collaborators. Like, if you're going to pay them, they're like, I'd be happy to work with you. I'm like, that's awesome because you're great. I admire you. I enjoy your work. So this is working out wonderfully. And then, I've also been doing this long enough that I know a lot of folks, we just work at this together, and we go, we're a community. I help you out. You help me out. This is a project we can all work on. The page rate that you would pay me would not make any significant difference in my life, my quality of life. I don't need it. I just want to work with you, and I want to maintain good relationships with you. And this will pay off in one way or another down the road. And that's happened as well. So the answer, Dallas, is that my experience and my background as a Harvard financial officer, it just informs me that, look, money, dollars and cents, they're just resources and tools to accomplish whatever it is you want. And some people would go, you've spent a crazy amount of money in your lifetime making comic books. And I say, that might be true, but I mean, I earn money so I can spend it on something, I don't know what else I don't play golf, I don't have a drug habit. Like, I'm not renting private jets, and I'm not saving up for a luxury yacht. I don't know. Like, I work hard for a living, and they give me a paycheck. And so, have I spent money paying artists to draw comic books that no one's ever going to see? Yeah, I've done that. Like, I have a bunch of comics that have not sold big numbers. And did I take a loss on them? Yes, but it wasn't ever about the profits involved. It was about the experience of making them. And what happens is that every time I make a comic book, I'm more experienced, and I have an opportunity to be better for the next comic I make. And I'm always happy about that. So every comic I make, I learn stuff, and I'm like, was that perfect? No, it's never going to be perfect, but the next one I make is going to be better. And I'm going to be more comfortable doing it. I'm going to be more confident doing it. And so, yeah, I've spent money hiring great collaborators to make fun comic books that, nobody's ever looked at, nobody's ever read, nobody's ever seen. And I don't regret it at all, because what was I going to do? Spend that money
Right.
somewhere else that that
Right.
one joy of being a professional poker player is I've seen money disappear in the blink of an eye for no good reason, and I've had
yeah, at least this is for a
thousands.
good reason, even though the money sort of also disappears in a blink of an eye. You're like, but that fulfilled me, and probably the artist too.
The money disappears in the blink of an eye, but the work lives on forever. Like,
And that's true too.
look, they've discovered ancient writings on papyrus that have survived thousands of years,
right.
and like you print something up that can last a really long time. Whereas when I'm playing poker, like I make a bad bet and someone beats me and they take all my money. I'm like, nothing happened there other than all my money just disappeared, and
Right.
I have nothing to show for it. I'm happy about these comics. I understand not everyone is comfortable. There's always a cost benefit analysis to decisions we make as individuals, and I know how much it cost me, and I don't mind. I feel like how much are you willing to pay to pursue your childhood dreams, your lifelong ambitions? What price do you put on that? So I've grown up always wanting to make comic books, and somehow, fortunately, through my life choices and my eventual destination, I was put in a position where I can make comic books, and I can't complain about that. Now, are they selling like Marvel and DC? No. Are they making movies about it? No. But do I get to make comics? Yes. Are people reading the comics? Yes. Are people enjoying the comics? Yes. So I have no complaints. I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful that the universe has given me this opportunity, and I'm thankful that I get to take advantage of it. If you had told me as a kid that I was going to marry my teenage sweetheart, and that I would get to make comic books and people would buy them, they would pay money to buy my comics, and that I would be in a band and that we'd record music in studios with all the equipment from the bands that I loved growing up. I was just like, all of that sounds absurd, and I don't believe it's all improbable that I would get to experience that. But comics are something I've always wanted to do. I'm thankful, I'm fortunate that I have the finances and the resources to do that. And then if somehow we take care of the business aspects properly, it can even be profitable. And you can sell enough comics, or you can license characters to enough deals where wine companies are paying you for the comics that you make so that they can put it on wine label. And then you're like, well, now that's supplemental income. Now that's found money. And suddenly you're like, all right, there are different income streams just from the process of creating characters and writing stories. Suddenly there are other opportunities that open up to you that you never would have imagined.
All right. And actually, to that end, Dave, let's circle back around to bad press sort of.
Yes. So on that topic, I would say right before we hit Bad Kids Press, I did want to just throw in my one note that, like, to your point of, is this selling Marvel DC numbers? No, but are people reading them and enjoying them? One thing, we mentioned to Bob when we talked to him the other day that I got Frankenrocker and the Jailbait Punks sight unseen. I just saw the preview blurb.
It's awesome.
And I was just, and I was just like, fucking A, yes. I don't know what this is. I don't know who's involved in it, but I have to try it. I have to see it for myself. And of course, the way pre-orders work, I basically had to pre-order all 4 issues before I really had gotten any of it. But I was just like, I'm in. Right. This just looks amazing. And to that point also, like the comics that are nearest and dearest to my heart, and I've been reading comics since I was 4 or 5. Like they were my gateway to reading, essentially. I was mostly looking at the pictures at first and then blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Exactly. But the ones that are nearest and dearest to my heart are comics that the majority of humanity have not heard of. But the small community that has, when I find someone that has heard of them, they're like, that's the best comic ever. It's the most amazing. And people don't have quite that it's not the same reaction that you get to your favorite Marvel or DC, even though that's still passionate. There's like this element of just like when you find that other person who knows about it and what that comic means to you, it resonates on a level that is just deeper and more meaningful. And so I think it has an impact that, while not in numbers and not in total cultural influence, the impact you have on those readers is arguably greater than what you get from something that sells tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of copies.
When people have asked me about this comic, I say, listen, it's all about finding your tribe, and everyone's going to have a different tribe. Everyone's going to belong in a different place. And I say, I make my comics and then I send them out into the world, and then I have no control over who picks them up, who buys them, who enjoys them, who misinterprets them, who hates them. I think about this. John Lennon was shot and killed by one of his big fans. He was like, I love John Lennon so much that I feel betrayed and I'm going to shoot and kill him. I'm like, that seems like a misinterpretation of John Lennon's intentions. I don't think he made the music with the intention that you would take a gun and assassinate him. And, same thing happened to Dimebag Darrell and Pantera. Like, there was a big Pantera fan, jumped on stage, said, I think I'm upset about the directions that things are happening, shot and killed him. And you're like, listen, when John Lennon and Pantera made their music, they sent it out into the world, and then they have no control over who interprets any of it. You can read it, you can listen to the music and go, here are the ideas, here's my perception of what things are. And it can be grossly misinterpreted. And, you have, as the creator, that's not up to you. That's up to how people receive it. You can send it out, you can create it, and then everyone else has the opportunity as individuals to interpret however they choose to. So when I make Frankenrocker and the Jailbait Punks, I'm like, I don't know. People have asked me, how many copies did you think you were going to sell? Do you think it's going to be a big success? Do you think it's going to make a lot of money? I'm like, I neither know nor care. Like, I can't factor any of that in. I have no idea. Like, that you're asking me to predict the behavior of the general public, which is not something anyone has ever been very good at. So I just wrote it to the best of my ability. I wrote a comic that I said, this is what I want to see in a comic book. It's what I want to see in an end result. I'm like, I don't think anyone's writing comics like this. I haven't seen comics that feel like this. I'm going to remain true to my vision of how this comic book should be. I'm going to send it out to the world, and I just hope it finds its tribe. I hope that the people who like it, the people who would be interested in it, find it and enjoy it. And then that's all I could ever ask for. And so when people like you say, hey, I bought it sight unseen and I love it, I'm like, that's great. That's all I ever wanted. That's all I could ever ask for. It's all you as a creator can ever do. And I think that, I have friends. I work in the comic community, and very cynically, they're like, I wonder what's going to sell. I'm like, man, if I knew that, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. Like, that's a very difficult thing to predict, which is why, movie studios make a movie like The Lone Ranger with Johnny Depp, and then it loses millions and millions of dollars because, movie studios have no idea what you really want to see. Like, they're like, this is a process, and we're going to invest millions of dollars in it. And then we're going to send it out there, and then we hope it doesn't lose a lot of money and bankrupt the studio. But we don't really know, because how can you predict these things? I had ideas about what I wanted to do in a comic book. I thought the comic book realized those ideas very well. My collaborator, Lukasz Kowalczuk, did an amazing job. And it was a true collaboration where the two of us worked together, and we were just like, we have an idea of what we want this thing to look like, and we have an idea of how we want this story to go, and we just invested ourselves into it, and we did it to the best of our ability. And the fact that anybody bought it and anyone enjoyed it, that's great. That's great. It's all I could ever ask for. And that's all. As a comic book creator, all I ever want to do is take the weird, crazy story ideas I have in my head and have an opportunity to share them with other people. So that's it. And that's the dream. And I get to live the dream. And that's wonderful. And so, I feel bad for folks who get into comics. I don't know why anyone would do this. I know people who do this. I know individuals. I've talked to individuals who get into comic books hoping to make a lot of money.
Right.
Well,
like
the
question, what sells? Do you know, what do you think is going to sell? And my first question back to that person is, well, why do you want, are you sure you're going to want to work on the thing? Even if you think that's going to sell, one, you can't really know that, but even if you think you did, why are you choosing it that way? This is going to take a lot of commitment and work that might not sell in the ultimate end. Timing is part of it. You might be like, it sells right now, but it might take you a year to make it. And by the time you're putting it out, no one cares anymore. You never know. So why is that the reason you want to make it? And that's a big factor too.
Yeah. And I get it. I feel bad. So, these are some of my friends and they're like, man, I love making comics. I spent so much time making comics. I wish I could support myself financially just as an indie comics creator. I'm like, I hope you're able to do that and good luck. But the history of the comic book industry suggests you're going to spend a lot of time and effort making it and not make a lot of money doing it. And I'm just talking about the dude, drawing on copy paper and then going to, the copy shop at Kinko's and Xeroxing out zine level. I'm talking about like folks like Jack Kirby, who basically created the Marvel universe and did not profit commensurately, proportionally.
Well, there's no retirement plan for comic creators, which is, even the money you're making on the mainstream, you're breaking your back to produce the product at that speed and at the quantity they need. And you make enough to live off of, but things like retirement, medical, health, like that will still bankrupt you as soon as, anything goes wrong. Like, it's not enough to really sit on unless you are one of those rare, like in every industry, breakaway, crazy successful creators with that fan base that will just spend oodles and oodles of money on you at every stop. But that is a rare bird,
And you have to set your expectations accordingly, and you have to be realistic about it. So, I just got into this conversation, social media, where people said, hey, if you were talking to young aspiring artists, what advice would you give them? And I said, find a way to support yourself. You don't have to dedicate yourself wholly to your art. I think that the notion of the starving artist has been over romanticized. And I said that, look, you don't have to live and die with your art. You're allowed to support yourself and make a living and get a paycheck and be comfortable and then still work on your art on the side. A lot of people have done that. That's what I've done. And I'll tell you, I've been more creative and more productive, and my art has been better when I haven't had the crushing anxiety of paying bills weighing down on me, supporting myself, getting and having enough food to eat. Like, those are concerns. As a professional poker player, you don't have a safety net. You either win money or you lose money, and it's a big reality check. When you're a professional poker player, if you play poorly, they take all your money and you're broke and you can't pay any bills and you can't buy any food. And so you always have to be grounded. You always have to know realistically just what your expectations are for what you can afford and what you cannot. And I said, I was carrying a mortgage at that time, but I was also single. I was not yet married, and I wasn't dating my current wife. We weren't dating seriously. I said, if I screw this up, I'm the only one that has to suffer the consequences of my foolishness. No one else gets hurt. Like, I've made this decision. I've made it consciously, out of my own will and volition. And I am making a fully conscious attempt to take this risk. And if I play badly and I'm not as good a poker player as I think I am, and I lose a lot of money and I can't pay my mortgage, well, it was my house to begin with. I'm allowed to lose it. Like, that's just me making decisions for myself. And as a poker player, you start to understand, I get the relationship with money as a tool, as a resource to provide you with the necessities you want in life. And I'm like, okay, that all makes sense, and I get it. Here are realistic expectations for how comic books are going to work. And I didn't say to myself, I'm inventing the new Batman, I'm inventing the new Spider-Man. Look, I remember when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles first came out, and I have that first issue. It was a second or third printing. It wasn't a first printing, but I bought that first issue off the stands from my comic book store. And so great for Eastman and Laird that they made so much money off this little indie project, and that's fantastic. And it started off the entire 90s indie black and white boom. Now to have those expectations, it's completely unrealistic. A good expectation is that you're going to spend a lot of time and effort on a book, spend a lot of money doing it, and no one's ever going to buy it, and you're never going to get that money back. And I'm like, if you think that way, then you're not upset if that's how it plays out. Instead, you're going to have to find your rewards from something other than the financial profit and the income stream of creating a book. So now, what are those rewards? Well, I got to do something creative, and I got to make a project that was just living inside my head. It's now a physical reality. I can pick up this comic, it's right there, and it exists. Other people can buy it, and other people can enjoy it. Now, whatever happens after that, it's outside my realm of control. All I want to do is be able to create a comic. And if I don't go broke, have opportunities to make other comics after that one. And that's the life of a creative individual. Honestly, I understand. I come from a position of privilege where my day job allows me to pursue these interests, But even if it didn't, all I ever need to make a comic is some copy paper and a pencil, and it's going to cost me nothing. The reason it costs me a lot is because I like working with cool guys who do great stuff. But if I can't do that, I know how to draw. I know how to, I know how to write stuff, and it wouldn't cost me anything. There's no budget. One of the joys of making comics is that if you really want to do it, there's nothing to stop you. There is zero to stop you.
That's very true. Bar for entry is pretty low, pretty accessible.
It is, and that, look, historically, before we lived in this day and age, if you wanted to make comic books, you had to have access to a printing press. And in order to have access to a printing press, like Marvel and DC and others like Gold Key and Dell and Charlton, you had to sell enough numbers so that they would create the plates, so that they would run the press. So basically, you needed to be able to sell. You had to have distribution numbers in the thousands just to have access to the printing press, just so that you could make these comics, which meant that there was a relative monopoly of it, which is why there weren't a lot of indie comics, because who could afford to rent out a printing press to make those comics? Now, you don't need to do that. First off, there's the development of home printers and laser printers and jet printers, and there's print on demand. But not only that, like, you can just put stuff on the internet. You can scan the thing and just put it on the internet and never print anything. And so now you don't need access to a printing press, and you don't need to encounter these obstacles and barriers. If you want to tell your story, there's nothing stopping you. People always tell me, I want to make my own comic. I'm like, you can. I mean, that's the joy of it. You absolutely can, as opposed to if I wanted to make a Marvel movie, the budget involved, the people involved, before you even get started, you're all right, well, who are the producers? Who are the screenwriters? Who's the director? Who's the cinematographer? Oh, wait, we're going to have to get stuntmen. Oh, wait, CGI. It seems like we're going to have to get a lot of those, catering. And then you have all those, jobs that people don't, it's like, I need a best boy. I need a gaffer. I mean, yes, you'll need all that, because the amount of communal energy involved as an ensemble project for making a Marvel movie means that you need a lot of folks and you need a lot of money. It's not true for a comic book. I need a pencil and a piece of paper and I'm ready to go. And, I love making them. I'm glad I get to make them. I'm fortunate that I have money to do them at the level I would like to. But if I didn't, I've spent enough time making them by myself that, I could do that as well. And anyone else can. Yeah.
Yeah. So on that topic, talk about, so you are part of Bad Kids Press in terms of like, you co-founded it, correct?
it started as a loose collective.
Give us that story.
So I'm not going to take credit for co-founding it, but I'm a member of it. And you know, I am very heavily involved with it. And at this point, Bob, who you've talked to, and myself are the people who pretty much help keep the engine running, you know?
Gotcha.
So yeah, I am heavily involved and heavily invested in it. It basically started out, you guys know this, but in case other people, I'll just repeat it, is that, you know, Comicazi is a comic book store. It's a retailer. It's a brick and mortar shop that exists in our neighborhood. It's in walking distance from where I live. And, you know, Bob was a co-owner of Comicazi. And I used to just go there as a patron. I would go there because I was miserable playing poker and I needed company and interaction with other human beings. I'd walk through those comic book stores and hang out with the people there. But eventually I got to know the owners of the store. And once you know the owners of an establishment, you don't feel like you're loitering, just hanging out in the establishment. Like when I first started out and I was a patron, I'd feel bad walking into their store and not buying anything. Like they probably don't want you doing that. And you feel self-conscious just hanging out and flipping through the comics and then putting it back.
Same.
Like that was not a comfortable situation for me. But then once you know the owners, they own the place. And when you're a friend of theirs and they know you, then suddenly you're like, there's no problem here. This is their place, and you're a welcome guest in it, you know?
Yeah,
and
me and Dallas have a winery here in LA that we feel that way. We finally got to that stage where it's like, we can go there and hang out and talk to the people behind the counter. And like, they really don't care if we wind up buying anything or not anymore. And it's like, it's like our Cheers place.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and it's fantastic, you know, it all returns back to finding your tribe. And so originally I didn't want to distract them. I'm like, this is their place of business. I can't, you know, they don't want me there as a distraction, but I eventually got to know, you know, my two favorite owners, Mike and Bob. And I introduced poker games to their store. And, you know, Mike was a neighbor and he was, I only had, 40 wedding guests at my wedding, and one of them was Mike, who was the co-owner of Comicazi. And then now Bob, who you guys interviewed, was another co-owner, and I got to know him because we would play chess together. He had a chess set out in the store, and I would walk in and I'm like, Bob, how can you play chess with these other guys, but whenever I walk in, we don't play chess? He's like, these games take forever. I'm like, I could bring in my chess clock. He's like, you've got a chess clock? I'm like, yeah, I've got a chess clock. He's like, definitely bring it in. So now one of the owners of the store is my neighbor and attended my wedding as one of the 40 guests I got to invite. The other I was playing chess with, and you know, he wanted me in the store because I had a chess clock, and you know, so now I'm hanging out with him on a social basis, and then we start all playing poker together. I introduced poker into the store, and now I'm playing poker with everyone. And then, you know, Bob and I are in a band. We play in a band together. He's the vocalist and I'm the bassist, and we get together and rehearse, you know, for hours every week. And so Comicazi, right? It's a great store. And when I say that, I don't mean it just because I love it, but it's been objectively awarded an Eisner, which is, you know, the industry award is the equivalent of the Oscar. You know, so they won as best retail. They were the best comic store on the planet. The runner-up that year was from Barcelona, but you know, Comicazi.
Very nice.
Yeah,
I mean, it seems like they've really established like a collective, like an artist collective in the neighborhood, and that is, I mean, that is kind of a peak of what something like a comic store can do for the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
And that was how Bad Kids Press got started, was that they would hold open studios and everyone showed up and it was a community. And you all say, what are you working on? And what happens is that instead of being in isolation and working on all these projects by yourself, where you're feeling like, you know, like this misfit and this outsider and this weirdo, suddenly you're hanging out with all the other misfits and outsiders and weirdos, and you're all misfits, outsiders, and weirdos together. And now it's a community. And you turn around and go, oh, you also spend all your spare time making comics that no one's ever going to see. That's what I do. And it turns out that we all have this common interest, and we can encourage each other, and you can look at each other's work, and, you know, you can offer constructive criticism, or you can just offer encouragement and go, keep doing that, man. You're doing great work. And you go, oh, I see you've added more pages. That's fantastic. Congratulations on. And so the reason why I will never take credit for co-founding Bad Kids Press is because it was an open studio where everyone just showed up, and I was just one of those people who was part of the community. And so Comicazi, which is this great retailer, this great comic book store, opened their doors to the community, which is one of the reasons why they won the Eisner, which is that it's really a community-minded comic book store where people come in and they find that they belong and they can interact together. And so I love open studios. And what happens then is that you take all the comic book creators from the community, and the ones who are invested long term for the long haul keep showing up month after month, year after year. And so there are some folks who are like, I'd like to try this, or I'm interested in it. And they show up maybe for one meeting, maybe they show up for 10 meetings. But this started, I attended in 2016 was my first one, and now it's 2023. And we're still making comics together, and we're making them, you know, at a level that is, you know, the quantities. It's become something bigger than when it originally started, which is a bunch of folks drawing pages together. Now we have distribution so that our comics go all over the planet. We sell thousands of them, and people from every country can buy them on their local comic book stores and pick them up off the shelves. And yeah, I'm very thankful. So Bad Kids Press, it just started out with a great comic book store, inviting lots of people. All the people made comics, and then it was self-selecting. The folks who kept showing up and doing good work got to be the inner core of Bad Kids Press. The folks who did not have you know, the opportunity to keep making comics, or just didn't have the interest level to keep making it, they were just like, this is fun and I like you guys, but I can't do this month after month, year after year. And you understand that. But it's self-selecting, and we're still here, and Bad Kids Press still exists, and it's just grown. It's grown organically. You know, it starts off as a bunch of folks making comics together, and then a bunch of folks making comics and putting it on Kickstarter together. And, you know, it's crowdfunding, and, you know, crowdfunding is great. But one of the things we say about Kickstarter and crowdfunding is that essentially we're just selling to our friends and relatives. You know, like, you put out Kickstarter, there's so many books on Kickstarter, and all your friends and relatives buy it, and you fund it, and that's great. That was one step of what we had to do. That was one stage, and then we grew and developed, and then suddenly it's like, you know, making the comics is fun, but the part that's not fun, that's not glamorous, that's kind of a grind that nobody enjoys, is the distribution aspect of it. And so we said we have to dedicate ourselves to distribution, which is something nobody ever wants to do. But then once you secure it, it opens so many doors for you. And so, you know, you sit there and you go, we need distribution. And it's a long process. And you know, but fortunately, we were able to get distribution through Diamond, which is the, you know, primary industry distributor. Things have changed. There are other competitors now, like other people have gotten involved. But for the longest time, Diamond had a monopoly. They were the only ones bringing comics to comic book stores. Yeah. And we got into Diamond. The timing was not ideal. Just as we were about to submit our proposals to Diamond, the pandemic hit. And like, everyone stayed indoors, and no one was going out to comic book stores, and comic book stores had to figure out if they were going to survive. And Diamond said, we're going to stop shipping new product. And everyone said, we don't know what's happening with the comic book industry, you know, and this is and as an extension on a macrocosmic level, we don't know what's going on in the world. So, you know, in 2020, we were prepared to get distribution through Diamond. And at that point, everything came to a screeching halt. And like, in one, you know, on one level, it was very disappointing, but on another level, it was very beneficial because it gave us an opportunity to get ahead on the production. So, and we're just like, we have a couple of issues ready to go. We can get more issues ready to go. We can get more titles ready to go. We're going to have more lead time for all these books to come rolling out, because when the pandemic ends, and which it, you know, it was just a projection at that point. We didn't have any idea what the timelines were going to be, but we were like, we're going to have our product ready. We're going to have our comics ready. We're going to have extra time to write and draw and produce these books. And so Bad Kids Press, we, you know, Diamond started distributing books again, and people went out into the world again, went to comic book stores again. And when that happened, suddenly we had distribution, and we could get our books into every local comic store around the world. Like Dave, you said you bought it unseen, which is one of those things that could happen. Like I didn't know you, you didn't know me, but my book could get to you. And and
as a quick anecdotal plus that the pandemic wound up helping you guys out, at least in my case, because I had been kind of absent from the local comic shop world for quite a while. Like I'd spent many years just sort of like ordering online, and I'd kind of walked away from the whole thing and moved on to other things. And during the pandemic, I started to get in my mind, I think the comic shops need a little extra assistance right now. Maybe I should start pre-ordering through them, not just buying shit on Amazon anymore, but actually, and like through crowdfunding and things like that. I'd gotten deep into backing Kickstarters and things like that. But then I went back online, and this was just as things were opening up again. And one of my local comic shops, Golden Apple Comics here in LA, they had the ability where at the end, the final week of every month, they put everything in Diamond that Diamond is distributing online, and you can pay for it right then and there.
That's awesome.
And like select it. And that's where I saw Frankenrocker. And if it wasn't for the pandemic, and if it wasn't for being able to order, like having the shop to let it, like none of that would have happened. So it was like my comeback to comics. And of course, I love comics like what Bad Kid Press do. So that's where I was looking for. I wasn't looking to get back into Batman or Spider-Man. I was looking to get back into that type of stuff. Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the advantages of the world we live in now is that people can find what they like. I grew up before the internet. I'm 51 years old. I was born in 1972.
That's okay. Me and Dallas are both in our mid-40s, so we're not too far
calm down. I guess I could still pass for 35. Chill out.
That is a deep dark secret of Dallas's.
But the truth is, folks like us in our generations remember the world before the internet, and we know what that was like. And what happens whenever I try to explain this to people, where when I applied to college, I couldn't look colleges up on the net or in Google or Wikipedia. I had to buy a thick book, and then the book would have one page on every college. And, it would just go, this is what
you
we
had to sit down with your guidance counselor in person as they walked you through shit. And you were like, huh?
That's right.
You had to request the brochures.
I mean, I help people now who are applying to colleges, and they're like, how did you decide on this college or that? I'm like, listen, you're far more informed as an 18-year-old than I ever was. Like, I'm 51 and I went through the process, but the fact of the matter is, I didn't know anything about these colleges I was applying to across the country. It was sight unseen in many cases. And the point is that there was a limitation on information. There was a limitation on what you could consume. And now it's different. We live in a world where if I wanted to hear a song when I was growing up, I had to listen to the radio and wait till the DJ played it. And he might not. You might want to call in and request it, but like you can
be ready to hit record at the right time.
Exactly. And then you can preserve it and play it, whenever you want on the
mixtape after that. Yeah,
exactly. But and that's how I found so many great bands and the 90s that I love. But now. Spotify exists, and you have every album by every artist in instantaneous demand. And so I tell folks, listen, we don't live in a monoculture anymore where there's, just one thing that everyone listens to all the time. It's very diffracted, and, it's segmented, and that's fine. But the thing about it is that even though we're not all listening to the same thing at the same time, everyone has an opportunity to find whatever it is they want. And like, it's out there, and it might not be this big, massively successful thing, but if you want to go in that direction, it's out there available for you. And so it's so great that people can put their comics out there, and like whoever is interested in that kind of thing, it's not going to be everyone, but whoever's interested in that kind of thing can go and find it. And it's the same for television. I had 3 stations growing up it was ABC, NBC, CBS. And now it's like, hey, Netflix has every movie you want. Amazon Prime has every movie you want.
When we grew up, there was like 5 movies that always played on TV, and you became so intimately familiar with them because it's all you fucking had.
That's right. So, look, a comic, like, it's great. You put it out there, people find it, people like it. Music exists in the same way now. People can find it and people like it. And whatever it is that you want, even if it's not what everyone else wants, if you know what you're looking for, people are out there making it, and they might not be making it mass consumption levels, but like, you know, if it's just for you, that's great. And if you can have access to it, that's great. And I never intended to write a comic that was meant to change the world or, you know, go out and do great things. I just want people to enjoy it when they got their hands on it. It's meant to be a romp. It's not meant to be this artistic literary work. You know, like you said, when you were picking out your theme music, you're like, oh,
right.
That's awesome.
People can see the what we're talking about here.
Yeah,
the Frankenrocker and the Jailbait Punks. There you go.
And if people know their punk rock, each one of those covers is an homage to a classic punk album, and you know, I hope that the punk rockers appreciate there. But if you're just a comic fan, it's just very cool art by a very cool artist. And God bless.
Right, I like that on this one. You even gave him the hair, right? Yeah, to throw on this one. Yeah.
That's right. Well, he wanted to be faithful to the looks, and I thought he did a great job. It was, you know, just one of those Easter eggs. But yeah, I enjoyed making them. It was just meant to be a romp. I just want people to pick it up and enjoy it, and nothing more. It's not a great statement. Like we said, when you were picking out your theme music, you know, you were like, there's this thing that's, you know, really high class and quality, and you know, I'm just like, not. This book will not be like that. It's not high class. It's not quality. It's very much more from the same spirit of things that B movies came out, low budget indie flicks, where you go and see it at a drive-in. You know, it's just like it's meant to be there. It's meant to entertain you, and then you're not meant to have deep philosophical thoughts about it. Like I'm not trying to impress.
Or if you do, more power to you.
Absolutely.
You know,
right. I mean, because they're kind of in there. They make fun of deep philosophical thoughts in its way, but at the same time, you know, the themes are there, so you can.
Sure.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, you know.
But no, I get you. It is a romp. It is absolutely like that punk ethos of like, this is meaningful, but not in a way where you're supposed to calmly sit there and dwell on things. It's meaningful in the raw passion, power, feeling of the whole thing.
As a musician, I would engage with the music of Bob Dylan differently than the way I would engage with a Ramones record. And Bob Dylan, I could listen to those lyrics, you know, thousands of times. And I'm like, I think that he's captured the essence of humanity. And then with the Ramones, I'm like, this just feels good. You know, it's fast, it's fun, it's catchy. That's all I want out of that record. And you know, it's the same thing with movies. Look, the Fast and the Furious is going to appeal to a different segment of the population than a Fellini movie. And you're just like, it's good that both exist, but my comics are going to feel more like, you know, disposable pop culture that, you know, it's just, and that's all it means to achieve. I just wanted to do it. I thought it was fun. I enjoyed it while I was doing it. I hope that when people go, it's like, it's meant to have like this spontaneous energy to it, as opposed to this deeply contemplative, intellectual component to it. And you know,
and for listeners, just to give you the quick breakdown, this is the Frankenstein monster in essentially modern day lead singer and lead guitarist of a punk band, Frankenrocker and the Jailbait Punks, who get ferried away to an alien planet to end a war on the alien planet. That is the basis of Frankenrocker and the Jailbait Punks. So I'm sure I'm gonna put some more images of Lukasz's art up here on the screen. I will, because this art it's a little, the closest thing I can compare it to is, you know, you have like your indie underground comics of the 80s and 90s, or something maybe a little more into the late 90s, like something like a Jim Mahfood, but then blended with like Garbage Pail Kids, right? Where it's just like this crazy, but it is such a palette that he puts on this, and the stuff going on every, like in the background, on every panel, on every spread, I mean, you could spend as much as you don't dwell on deep thoughts per se in this comic. You could spend 10 minutes on this one double page spread.
I think you're selling yourself a little short there too, Roel. Like, you know, the deep contemplative moments are. I mean, they're existential.
These are the themes. The themes are solid. They are there. So, yeah.
So you know, I think there's some rumination that's going to happen when people come across this.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, guys. I mean, I appreciate that. That's very nice for both of you to say, and I appreciate that. I just want to write so that people enjoy it and have fun. And you know, I didn't try.
And I think you can read it that way. Like, you know, everyone can take, like, as you mentioned before, everyone takes what they think they're getting out of that work. But I think there's enough there. And you've, you know, between the different characters that you put together and even the war between the two aliens and how you handled that without, I mean, like you said, it's just a blast and a half. But at the same time, like, there's a lot to take away from that. Like, it's not inconsequential.
Well, I enjoyed making it, and you know, it was a real honor to work with such a talented individual like Lukasz Kowalczuk, and he brought so much to the table, and I am eternally thankful to have him as a friend and collaborator. And he was a guy that I met from doing those anthologies. We were in an anthology together. Like, it was the first comic book anthology project I ever contributed to. I'd been, you know, sort of this isolated individual, self-published guy. And when I got invited to work, so in addition to making comic books, I'm a big pro wrestling fan. And folks knew that about me. And on social media, I would comment about pro wrestling, and I would do posts on pro wrestling. I used to do, you know, publicity work.
But you're not writing the wrestling comic from Bad Kids Press. What gives there?
I mean, you know, I'm working on some indie wrestling comics from Bad Kids Press as well. Like, yeah, there's plenty of room for everyone. I don't have to be the only pro wrestling comic book writing fan. So
he's saying he will not be the only pro wrestling. There will be more. It's all coming.
We hope so. Yeah. There are a wide variety of interests and a wide variety of talented individuals who can pursue those interests. But Lukasz and I, there was a pro wrestling comic book anthology, and I contributed a story to it, and Lukasz contributed a story to it. And the great thing about anthology, look, so many people ask me, how can I get started making indie comic books? And I say anthologies are a fantastic way to start, because you don't have to create this 12-issue, 240-page epic series where you're writing, drawing, coloring, lettering, everything. Like, you know, an anthology, you can write a 4-page story, you can draw a 4-page story, and then other people will take it, and then it's going to get published, and everyone's going to see it.
And also, do you like making a 4-page story? I think that's a good, like, it's a good test for yourself, where it's like the experience of doing 4 pages. Did that almost break you, or how do you feel about that? Right.
And then as a writer, that's a challenge. It's like, can you tell a story in 4 pages? Like, I mean, sure, you can tell a story in 240
I have a mutual friend that got 2 pages in an anthology, and all he did on social media while he was writing it is he was like, "This is so hard."
Right.
It is.
It's a challenge, and I was just like, you know, at first I was like, I don't know, I've never done it. I came from a background where I was writing 330-page novels, you know, and I was just like, you know, 8-page comic book stories. But then you learn everything has a form, and it's the same thing like with a punk rock song. A good 2-minute punk rock song is not a 3-hour symphony orchestra performance where you're just like every note. I'm like, yeah, you're in, you're out, you're done, you make your point. And so I worked on these anthologies. I enjoyed these anthologies. My first recommendation to people trying to break in and figure out how to get involved and how to start making comics, and I'm like, start small. Don't take on the biggest project of all time. You know, Steven Spielberg didn't start off making like Saving Private Ryan. He started off with home movies in his backyard, you know, carrying a camera around, and, you know, like, start small and build up and develop skills, and develop a community of folks who are like-minded, who will work along with you. And so that's what I tell folks. And fortunately, it worked out for me. Lukasz contributed a story. I contributed a story. I said, I want to work with Lukasz. And then by also being part of this community on social media, because we'd all worked on this project, we all have each other's contact information. We're all on each other's social media pages. And when you start to approach these people. Now I say to Lukasz, I have an idea for a series. Will you want to work with me? I can say to him, we worked on this project together. Here is my work. You can see what I contributed. You can see the level of quality, and you're a known commodity. You're not a random stranger. You're not cold calling. You're like, we're peers. We're working on the same stuff. We have the same interests. You can see, here's some of the stuff I've done in the past. I can show him my portfolio. I can show him my body of work. And then in the end, like, you're like, great, I love your work. And now you're going to work on my comic and we're going to do something cool together. And that's just the way. Lukasz was great. I was so happy to have discovered him by working on this anthology. He brought so much to the comic.
He's quite
his
a find.
artwork.
Yeah.
The reason I chose him when he worked on the anthology was, the anthology is, maybe 200 pages of comics with dozens of different artists. And the one thing that happened was that as I flipped through it, Lukasz's art stood out. It looked so different from everyone else's. And I flipped through it and I'm like, who is this guy? This guy is noticeable. He's memorable. Like, you literally remember him. Like, everyone else, they do good work. This guy can draw well. This guy has, the house style of Marvel and DC. And then Lukasz is like, you have completely developed your own different, unique thing. And it grabbed me immediately. Like, I looked at it, I'm like, this is so different from everything else. And when I look at it, I'm just transfixed. And so I said, I need to work 100%. With him. And so we have, and we did it. And I couldn't be more thrilled with the results. Like, one of the great joys as a creator, as a writer, is when you write a script and then the pages come back much better than you ever could have imagined. You have a picture in your head of what the page is going to look like. And then Lukasz is like, yeah, but I'm a very talented individual. I'm a great artist. And whatever it is you were thinking, picturing, or envisioning, here's something that's 1,000 times better. I'm like, this is the joy of collaboration.
Yes. Well, I was going to ask, because you are an artist in your own right. And obviously, looking at Lukasz's art on Frankenrocker, it's a no-brainer. It fits so seamlessly and seems, even though I don't know how much of, did you have the concept first and then thought of him, or was it his art that almost inspired the concept? It seems such a marriage made in heaven.
So I've had that concept. When I first graduated from college, I didn't know how to get into comics. And it seemed like the way to get into comics was to get a job at Marvel and DC. And the way to get a job at Marvel and DC as a writer was to write pitches. And what a pitch was that you would take existing characters and you would suggest a storyline. But the problem was I was some random, unknown, obscure, unproven writer. And I wrote these pitches as an exercise and to develop experience. But I was also like, this isn't going to get me anywhere. So I wrote a pitch in the 90s, I wrote a pitch for a Marvel character named Dazzler. And Dazzler is a disco mutant who, she's a performer, she's a singer, right?
At least back in the 80s, the roller skating.
Exactly. Back then. She was this, and she was kind of a joke character. Like, she was developed, like attached to a movie deal and everything. And she debuted in a graphic novel, but she was very dated because she was designed to be sort of this disco singer character, and disco died out. And suddenly you have this character that's attached to a genre, a form of music that's no longer popular. It feels very dated. And so I wrote this pitch about how Dazzler, who used to be this disco singer, suddenly adopted punk rock. And so,
love it.
So I write this story about Dazzler going, I used to be someone, I used to be famous. Now no one knows who I am. And I'm playing this empty dive. And so I script that out. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I like what I'm writing here. I like this scene of Dazzler with a punk rock band in a complete dive club playing for people who don't appreciate her. And I'm like, script looks good. Marvel's never, ever, ever going to produce this. I'm never, ever going to write a Dazzler script for Marvel. But I'm glad I wrote it. It was a good experience, and the words and the dialogue and the scenes seem good. And so you tuck that away in a drawer or whatever, and you're done with it. And then as time goes on, you start to realize you're part of the indie comic creation community, and you have opportunities to work on your own projects, and you start trying to figure out who you want to work with and what you're going to work on. And Lukasz, so here's one of the things I try to do is that if I'm a writer and working with an artist, the one thing I try to do is give the artist stuff he wants to draw, he or she wants to draw. I try to give the artist things they're good at drawing, you know?
Right.
And so it doesn't make sense. You know, Lukasz has told me directly, he's like, I'm not good at drawing beautiful girls. Like, that's not a thing I do. You know, some people are. Adam Hughes has made a career out of it. Frank Cho has made a career out of it. Milo Manera. Like, there's some people, they love drawing beautiful girls, and you look at their girls and you're like, oh, amazing. You know, and Lukasz is like, I don't do that, man. And I'm like, I get it. You know, like, I know, I'm familiar with your work. And so I said, what is it that Lukasz can draw? He can draw monsters and mutants and aliens and reptilians. And I'm just like, punk rock, that seems like right up his alley. So, you know, I'm looking at this. I'm like, here is the marriage. Here's how the idea comes together. It's like, when you're in the 90s, you're writing pitches because you're trying to get into Marvel Comics, and you have an old Dazzler pitch where Dazzler goes from being a disco performer to a punk rocker. Years go by, and suddenly you're involved with Lukasz Kowalczuk, who is willing to work with you, and you're like, what can I give him? What can he draw? And I'm like, he needs to draw a punk rock story. Oh, it turns out I have a punk rock idea that's sitting in my desk drawer, and I don't own the rights or intellectual properties to the disco mutant Dazzler, but
and switch out the beautiful girl, because that's not the strength, right? So,
no, and I mean, so I'm like, I'm pretty sure Frankenstein's monster is in the public domain. I'm pretty sure I can take Frankenstein's monster, you know. And I remember the title of you know, a terrible 80s, you know, straight to video movie called Frankenhooker. And I'm like, Franken becomes an adjective. You just attach it at the start, you know, it like becomes a prefix. You can attach Franken to like at one point, the Punisher, Frank Castle, became this like mutated monster, and you know, they just attached the Franken as a prefix to him, and you know, he's like Frankencastle, and you're like, I don't know what that is, but all right, fine, he's Frankencastle. Like, you know, you can use Franken as a prefix. Frankenhooker worked. Frankenrocker, you know, it's not like a real word. No one says Frankenrocker, but like people immediately.
But no one questions it. I think you're right about that. It just works. Yeah.
Right. Like, you have on an intuitive level, you understand that it's a rocker that has some Frankenstein element to it, and which is what it is. It's, you know, so, all right, what are the ideas I have? I'm just like, look, I actually heard people said, you know, the word jailbait has some unsavory connotations to it. I'm like, right. Well, but here's the thing. It also catches your attention. You notice it. And punk rock tends to have unsavory elements to it. Like, you know, it's not pretty and clean and sterile. And I just love all those teen delinquent movies, you know, from the 50s, 60s, 70s, like, you know, this whole hot rod culture and biker gangs. And, you know, I'm just like, there's an element. When you put the word jailbait in there, you're automatically announcing, listen, this is not a Merchant Ivory film, okay? Like, you're in for a different kind of ride. You're declaring your intentions. Like, if you call your movie Dude, Where's My Car? You're just like, this is gonna be different than Howard's End. You just you set the expectations. And so I'm like, all right, this is a title where it does a lot of the heavy lifting. Like, you don't even need to know what's in the book, but when you hear the title Frankenrocker and the Jailbait Punks, you're like, I suspect that's going to be different than, you know, the other comics sitting on the shelf next to it. It seems like it's trying to do something different. It's declaring its intentions in a different way. So
perfect logo, by the way.
Lukasz is a genius. He designed that. I sent him some suggestions. He's like, these suggestions are not any good. You know, no offense, but you're not nearly as talented as I am at doing it. And so he did a great job with the logo. It works perfectly. It's thematically unified. It's, you know, completely dedicated to the work inside the book. So
right.
Yeah, the idea, it all came together, where I was just like, I love these schlock B movies, you know, grindhouse.
Yep.
Yeah, like there's a joy in low culture. Like I've spent a lot of my life involved with high culture, and you know, like,
right.
and that's great. It helps advance the culture in the society, and I have great appreciation for it. But there's something kind of fun about low culture. And
oh yeah,
you know, like if this is reminiscent of a low budget schlocky sci-fi drive-in film from the 50s and 60s, I'm like, that's perfect, because there aren't enough comics that are doing that kind of thing. And
right.
I just said, I've got all the elements in place. I'm working with a great artist, and I know what he likes to draw are monsters and aliens and reptilians and mutants. And I'm like, I can do that for him. I think the title Frankenrocker and the Jailbait Punks immediately suggests to people, this is a weird comic. Like, and for the folks that this is for, they know it's for them. For the folks who like that kind of thing, they know that this is the thing that they're going to like. And I just happened to have an old Dazzler pitch sitting around, and I said, well, you know, Dazzler, Frankenstein's monster, you know, you just swap them out. And yeah, the Dazzler pitch only had a couple of pages, but I could build off of it, because I had that opening scene, and I said, it's this character in this dive bar who is feeling the joy of performing punk rock music purely for the pleasure and enjoyment of doing it. And I said, that gives me a direction. You know, like people always say, hey, the hardest part of writing is, you know, writer's block and the empty page, the blank page. Where do you start? Like, I already knew where I was starting. I knew that punk rock was going to be a central element, and the primary, the protagonist, you know, the main character, had a certain attitude towards punk rock, had a certain passion for it, a love for it, an understanding. Like I had defined sort of an attitude towards punk rock. What does punk rock means different things to different people. For some people, it's loud and noisy and unpleasant, and that's not what they ever want to listen to. And I get it. That, you know, my wife does not care for punk rock, and I'm like, you don't have to. You know, I totally get it. Punk rock is not gonna be everyone's favorite form of music, but I had a character who had a relationship with the music, and the relationship was that they said punk rock is not just a genre of music to me, but there's also you know, an ideology behind it, and
ethos,
and
ideology,
what is that?
that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so then I'd written those pages, and I'd sort of, you know, defined the ideology, and I said, I have an understanding of the characters and the narrative here, and I'm just gonna let it loose. It's gonna be everything, you know, possible. It's going to be Frankenstein's monster. It's going to be punk rock. It's going to be reptilians and gray aliens and interplanetary wars. And I'm like, great. Like this, I'll just let it all play out, you know? And then in the end, you introduce black metal bands, you know, and you're just like, just let it all out. You have giant combining Voltron monster robots that
gotta have those. Gotta have those.
You might as well. You never know how many opportunities you'll have to write comic books. So if you have ideas,
I like the ramp up too, because by the time I was at issue 2 and they were already fighting the lizards, I was like, where is it? I'm like, they got 2 more issues to go. What else is going to happen? And then I'm like, oh, it's going to keep up in that game. That's awesome.
Yeah, you know, you sit there with an outline and you go, what is the narrative arc and where are we gonna go? And I just, like I said, one of the things that happened where people, they call it writing to the trade, and they call it decompressed writing. Decompressed writing meant that they extended a story, and this was something that happened in the major companies, the corporations, you know, Marvel, were basically a lot of pages, a lot of scenes where characters just bantering back and forth, and the action does not progress. And you know, you take a story that previously could have been told in a 20-page issue, and now suddenly it's told over a collected trade, and it takes you know, 120 pages to tell something, you know, that would have taken 20 pages previously. And I said, I'm just going to go in the opposite direction. This will not be a decompressed storytelling. This will be heavily compressed storytelling where everything is happening all the time, all at once, immediately, with a sense of urgency. And I was just like, it's a different approach, and I respect decompressed storytelling. It's enjoyable. I read it, I enjoy those comics, but this was just a different thing. It's punk rock energy. It's manic. It's frantic. It's frenetic. Yeah, and that's what it was trying to accomplish.
Awesome.
You did it. All right, let's talk about these wines.
Sure, let's talk about the wine. I'm going to get back to your band and music background too. We're going to get back to that, but yeah, let's talk about the wine since we're on Frankenrocker right this moment. This is the Frankenrocker Cote du Rhone.
There we go.
Everyone. Dallas, I think, probably drank his already.
Yeah, it's gone.
It's gone.
I have notes though. I have notes.
I cracked it open last night to give it a try. But yeah, this is so for people who watched part 1 where we drank the Red Menace Merlot. This is a Cote du Rhone, which is a 70-30 Grenache Syrah blend.
Yep.
Cote du Rhone, if you guys aren't familiar with it, this is going to make a bit heavier, a bit more. This works really well with Frankenrocker because it is still, the Grenache is light on its feet. The Syrah gives it a little bit more of a kick, but it's got a little, it's got that little element of it could age because it's got some harshness to it right now. It's got those tannins. It's got that little bit more depth and complexity to it. I enjoy that. The Merlot is super easy drinking. This one has got a little bit more, depth is probably a good word for it.
A little more complex.
A little more complex, a little more my speed than the Merlot. Although I'm telling you, if you guys aren't that big into wine yet, the Merlot is going to be your gateway because that is just crowd pleaser, through and through. Cote du Rhone then asks a little bit more of you when you're sipping these guys, but this is completely my jam. It's
so funny because I don't actually drink wine, and it's amusing to be part of releasing wine. But I did a signing at a wine store, Torres Square Wine and Spirits, and they had us there, and it was at a wine tasting, and so people were offering tastings of both the Merlot and the Cote du Rhone, and I was there with comic books and prints and everything, and people would ask us what is going on, and you sort of explain the basic concept. We created these comic books, and there are these wines available, and our characters were licensed, and now they are on the labels, and so you're talking to these folks, and people are trying it. So it's a wine tasting. You're giving them free wine, and people seem very happy. And we sold a lot of bottles of wine that day, and they're just like, wow, this is good wine. I'm like, that's fantastic. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. And so I don't necessarily drink wine, but my in-laws, so my wife's parents were wine critics in Napa Valley, when they were growing up. So they're very knowledgeable about it. And so I said, okay, I don't know anything about it, but here are a couple of bottles for you guys. And they said, oh, this is great. This reminds me of all the Vin du Pays that we used to drink in France. And my mother-in-law was like, listen, we love these wines, and this is exactly the kind of wine that you're never able to buy in this country because a Vin du Pays is just meant to be drank locally, right? It translates to the wine of the land, and so what happens is they make it there and they drink it there, and it never gets exported. And so it's very local, it's very fresh, it's very representative of the area, and so you drink it, and it gives you this feels like, oh, this is very much the French experience, and it's one of those things that they had very strong memories of when they visited France and they were drinking those wines. They're like, this is great. And then they drank the Cote du Rhone. They're like, this is very much, it reminds us all those Vin du Pays that we haven't been able to buy, that didn't get exported. And so they enjoyed it and they gave it high marks. So, I'm not a natural wine drinker, but I've started drinking because it is my wine, and, it's got my character on it, and I've enjoyed it. And people have said nice things about it. And I think that this has just been it's one of those things that I never would have predicted in my life. I
wouldn't have predicted it in my, I'm even into wine. And I'm like, when we mentioned this to Bob, but when I saw the 1-page ad in the final issue of Frankenrocker, I thought it was a joke ad. I didn't think it was real. I was just like, I'm like, oh, not a chance in hell. And I put the comic down and started walking away. And something in me was just like,
Yeah.
let me Google this. Let me just make sure that this isn't BS.
Yeah.
And then it was real. And I was like, oh, this has to happen. I don't know how I'm going to make it happen, but I'm making it happen.
So that's a great question, because I was under the impression the wine is only in sale in Massachusetts. So how'd you get your hands on a bottle?
So the way the laws work is, as samples to the press and the media, you are allowed to do that. I am technically not allowed to. I could not legally pay for this if I wanted to. That's the kicker.
That's awesome.
But
that's great.
Even though I'd be totally willing, I'd be like, look, we'll pay you guys. Just get it over to me. But Massachusetts, the state laws don't allow for that. So yeah.
So I go to a lot of comic book conventions. You know, I'm an experienced hand at comic book conventions, and we bring the bottles of wine, put them on display, and put them on the table. People are like, "Oh my God, that's awesome! Can I buy that from you?" And I'm like, "No, like, thank you. I love your enthusiasm. I like the fact you want to give me money for it. I love the fact you want to buy our product. You can't
sell it, right?
Yeah, I cannot. Like, I have no liquor license. This is a comic book convention. I'm not allowed to sell. I said to him, here's a list of places you can get it, and we appreciate the support, but no, I cannot buy. You know, it's completely illegal, and like, oh, come on, no one will know. I'm like, I appreciate it.
You can't risk it. You can't risk it. And when it comes to liquor laws, like, yeah, the U.S. they're rough on that.
That's right.
Like, it's not, if you don't get, there's no wiggle room. It's not worth it. Don't do it.
People ask about it, and it's a great conversation starter. And one of the things that's bad for is that all these people who are not interested in comic books, they know I make comic books, but they don't read comic books. And you know, these were people from like my mom's generation, and you know, they're in their 80s, and they don't read comics, but they drink wine. And so, you know, you talk to them and they're like, oh, I don't care anything about your comic books, but that's pretty awesome that you've got your own wine. I'm like, yeah, it's crazy. I don't know how it happened. It's wonderful that it worked out, and everyone says nice things about it, and people don't seem to object to drinking it. And you know, very, very knowledgeable folks who taste it are like, this is a good wine. I'm so glad. Like, it would be terrible to have your name attached to a bad product, but it's not. It's not. They've done good work, and 100%. You know, I knew they
would. The country wines, the reason people remember them is because, for one thing, if you ever do go over to France, I mean, you can usually get those kind of wines because they're local and there's no import fees and all that fun stuff.
Right.
I mean, you're talking like a couple of euros and you can get a bottle of it. It's wonderful. But then people remember it. It is your daily drinker over there, but really good daily drinker, not the thing you buy because you can't afford better. It's like you do it because it's delicious. But even imported, even though no one outside of Massachusetts yet can buy this wine, but if you are in Massachusetts, you can. So like Google Frankenrocker Cote du Rhone.
Yes.
You will find the storefronts that carry it. I did. I just couldn't get them to actually sell me any, so I wasn't able to do it. But this is only $14.99 USD a bottle. That's being imported, and that is the low end of wine bottle prices in the US. So you know this is, but it is easily worth that. It's worth more than that price in terms of imported wine. So it's a steal. I can't wait for it to come out to get distribution outside of Massachusetts. I know that's in the works. They're working on that. They got to find the wholesaler or whatnot that can, or the retailers to carry it, or the whatever it is. Hopefully that'll come in the future. Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things. I'm very happy that it provides great value. And that's one of the things that I want is like, look, you know, we don't want to break the bank. We want to get this in your hands. I mean, that's all I ever want of any of it. Like, if we make comics or if we make wines, we want to get in people's hands so that they can enjoy it. And, you know, people have said good things about the comic books. The people who've read the comic books have read them and enjoyed them, and that's great. And people have said very nice things about the wines, and that's great. People have bought them and enjoyed them, and they said nice things about it. And you know, what more can I ask for? Like, this is a wonderful opportunity. The way I just see things is that if you keep your head down and do the work long enough, opportunities will come your way. And that's just how it happens. And, you know, this is just one of those fortunate things where all the people involved were folks who knew each other. And if you treat people well over your journey, over your lifetime, then when you encounter them again, they're going to be happy to work with you. They're going to be happy to be involved with you. They're going to be happy to collaborate with you. All the people that I collaborated with on my comics back in 2007, which is now 16 years ago, I worked with them on multiple projects, and we're all happy to work with each other again and again. And, you know, that's one of the things that you just never know. Don't burn your bridges. And if anything ever doesn't work out the way you want, or it's less than ideal, don't throw a tantrum over it. Like,
learn what you can, whatever you think you're supposed to learn from that lesson. But then, you know, it's not about someone being at fault. It's not about having enemies after that moment. It's just about like, how did that situation occur, and how do you, if you hated it, how do you avoid it in the future?
Yeah.
That's it.
And so treat people well, be nice to them. And then what happens is that years will go by, and then you find out, oh, these folks want to work with you on one level or another. And so, you know, it's a very fortunate circumstances that you live long enough, you encounter different people, you cross paths with different people, you're in their circles. And at some point, all the folks with common interests who could benefit each other find each other. And the people who say, oh, you like comics, you like making comics, you want to produce these comics, you're interested in distribution. Oh, if I give you a project, a creative project to help design a wine label, people will reach out to you. They're like, I know you, I've worked with you, we've interacted with each other, we know that you're reliable, dependable, and solid. And so my entire life, I've had just opportunities fall into my lap. But then, you know, the thing they say about preparation is that you have to already be prepared by the time the opportunity comes. You can't have the opportunity show up and then start your preparation at that point. That's too late. You can't have this opportunity come and go, oh, I'm gonna cram, and right now I'm gonna figure out how to do this. Like, what you have to do is silently pay your dues and, you know, keep your nose to the grindstone and, you know, stay at the drawing board and work so that when the opportunity finally comes, you're like, I'm actually prepared for this. I've been doing the work in the background, and now the opportunity comes and I can actually take advantage of it. I can benefit from it. And so I feel very fortunate. You know, I'm 51 and I feel tired a lot. You know, I can't pull all-nighters the way I used to. If I have one bad night of sleep, if I miss a night, like, it affects me all week. It used to be I'd stay up all night, I wouldn't miss a beat. Now, if I don't sleep well on Monday, Friday night, I'm still kind of tired. Like, you know, one of the things I tell folks is, like, I have all these great opportunities coming my way in my 50s. I'm kind of wish they'd happened in my 20s when I still had all this energy, like, to take advantage of them. But the reality of it, the truth of it was that I didn't have everything lined up in my 20s. Like, I wasn't ready for it. Like, the reason why all these opportunities are coming now was I was putting in the work in the subsequent decades, you know? And so you put out your indie comics and you meet your collaborators, and you're slowly building up your skills and your network and your ability to manage a project. And by the time you're in your 50s, things have fallen into place that you could actually fulfill some of these ambitions, and you can actually see them through. And, you know, now you have wisdom and experience. I'm just tired all the time, but, you know, it's hard to complain. You can't complain about the fact that you get to live out your dreams and that everything you've ever wanted is now in place. You just have to be thankful for it, you know, show some gratitude, and try to have enough balance so you're not exhausted at all times. So it's great that these things are coming my way, and it's great to have these opportunities. And it's kind of funny that it's happening at this point in my life. I'm just like, I wish it'd come earlier, but that's not the way life works. You know, you just have to keep doing the work, and eventually people will realize, oh, he's put in, you know, he's put in his time, he's paid his dues. Now let's all work together, and these projects start appearing, and I'm thankful for it. I am.
Couple of things before we start to wind up here. One, let's get some information on the genesis of your band. What you guys do. You know, give us a quick rundown.
His and Bob's band. In the end.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so you know, I'll start talking about it, but then remind me about the questions if I get sidetracked.
No worries.
So I've been playing in bands. I started playing guitar. I started taking guitar lessons when I was 11, which is 40 years ago. So I've been playing guitar for 40 years, and I've been playing in bands. My first band that would play out and that would do shows. I was 16 in high school, and so I'm 51. So that was 35 years ago. So I've been playing in bands 35 years, and different band. And in college, I was very active in bands in college, and we would play shows, and then after a while, you get busy. You have a job, and you're like, I'm busy doing this job, and you get focused on your work, and at some point you're just like, I don't understand what the point is in being a band. It's never going to go anywhere. I don't see why I'm making all this music, and then eventually you start to miss it. You're like, I've put in all this time developing these skills, and I know how to play these instruments. I should probably put them to use. Also, I enjoy it. I enjoy being in a band, and I enjoy playing in front of people. And I enjoy recording music, and so about the 2016ish or so, I started playing with. I met a subway busker. He was a harmonica player named Tom Hanratty, played the harmonica on the subways. And I stopped and I talked to him and I said, that sounds great. You're very talented for a busker. You're an amazing harmonica player. And he goes, do you play an instrument? I'm like, yeah, I play guitar. He's like, well, we should jam. We should play together. And I said, okay. And so then I start, because I stopped to talk to the subway busker who was playing for change. He puts his band together, and now I'm playing in a band with this guy, and we're doing television tapings, and we're playing shows. And I'm like, okay, so we're doing this, and eventually that splits off. But I keep playing with the guitarist Sammy, who's in that band, and we're starting playing, and we're rehearsing on a weekly basis, and we're playing shows, and I'm getting paid. And I remember there was this one week where I was like, all right. People are buying my comic. I went to a comic book convention. I was tabling at a comic book convention, and people were buying my comics. And then I turned around and I played a gig, and we got paid for the gig, and I'm getting paid to play music. And I'm like, I'm getting paid to make comics and to play music. That's absurd. I wasn't getting rich off of it, but people are still paying for it. And so eventually I was playing in cover bands, and we were doing like 3 sets a night, and you'd play and get paid like $50 or whatever, and that was good. And but we were playing blues music, which I like, and I enjoy that, but also isn't my favorite kind of music. Like, I'm a punk rock guy. That's why I'm writing punk rock comic books. It's like punk rock. And I was playing with guys who were decades older than I was. I'm in my 50s, and they were in their 70s and 80s. And I was just like, guys in their 60s, 70s. They were older than me, approaching their 80s, and I was just like, I'm younger than them, and I listen to different music than they do. And I just said, the pandemic hit, and they were like, hey, we're playing these shows. Like, my wife has chronic health issues, and she also has, she takes immunosuppressive medication. And so when the pandemic hit, I was like, I can't be playing. Like, you have to find another guy. Just please feel free to replace me. I understand you guys need to keep playing and making the income, but I can't risk any of this during the pandemic. But what happened was that Bob, who owns Comicazi, had a natural built-in rehearsal space because he owned a brick and mortar shop with a basement, and that when once the shop closed and the retail business had ended for the evening, and there were no more customers in the store. It's like, now you've got a space in a basement, and he was playing with a friend, and I said, I also know how to play an instrument, and so I invited myself into the band. I was like, you guys are playing, I'm joining you, which I could do because I knew those people. They were friends of mine, but I also knew that I was talented enough. Like, I was like, I know how to play this stuff. Like, I've been playing this for 40 years. Right. This is something I'm capable of doing. And they needed, so there was only 2 of them. I'm like, you need more people anyhow. Like, it's again mutually beneficial. It's symbiotic. Right. It's they needed someone, and I want to join a band. And so then we started playing, and it's more 90s rock, alternative punk, garage band kind of stuff. And, you know, if you liked all those bands like Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Smashing Pumpkins and The Replacements and Husker Du, and yeah, like it's
the college playlist circa 1996, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. I'm just like, this sounds good to me. And so it's all original material. We write all our own songs. We've got about 22s. We went into the studio, we recorded in the studio, and we were recording in the studio with our engineer. And as we were ending our first session, we'd gone through our set list and whatever, and we're walking out, and my guitarist Tom says to me, "Hey, do you see that picture of Morphine? Like that poster? They hung up a poster of Morphine outside the wall." I'm like, "Oh yeah, we all love Morphine. Morphine's great. Like my wife and I have this favorite Morphine song. I played this song for her, and she's like, "That's a great song. We love Morphine." And so we looked at the poster. I'm like, "That's an awesome Morphine gig poster." And the engineer says to us, "Oh yeah, this used to be Morphine's old rehearsal space."
Oh wow.
I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, yeah. You know, after Mark Sandman passed away, they had all their instruments down here, and we bought a lot of their stuff, and we actually still have a lot of their old equipment. And I'm like, you should have told us that before we started recording. We want to play through Morphine's old equipment. Like, you should have told us. So what had happened is they have a lot of instruments. They have a lot of amplifiers down there. You know, it's a great studio, and they have a lot of options. And when we first got down there, I was like, I am playing through their state-of-the-art amplifier. And this state-of-the-art amplifier costs thousands. And, you know, they've got a 7-band EQ just for the mid-range. I'm like, I'm adjusting the mid-range. I'm like, oh, this is great, you know? And I'm like, I've never played through an expensive state-of-the-art, most expensive Ampeg bass amp that you can get. Fantastic. And then after that, I said, I'm not doing it. I'm playing through Morphine's bass amp. I'm not playing through the state-of-the-art amp. I'm playing through the amp that Morphine used to play through. I'm like, I don't care. Like, if it was good enough for Morphine, it's good enough for me. So I plugged into that thing, and I'm playing through Mark Sandman's old amp. And I went from an amplifier that had a 7-band EQ just for the mid-range to an amplifier that had 2 knobs on it. Yeah, one was volume and one was bass. And yeah, you adjust it, and the other one really didn't do. I was just like, all right, I've got 2 knobs, but that's all Mark Sandman needed. And it sounded great. I was like, does it sound good? Yes. And, you know, you'd rather play through the stuff that has the mojo in it. It has the magic in it.
Right.
Even if just for the story. You're like, yeah. So we ended up recording in Morphine's old rehearsal space. We recorded every song, went through their guitar amp, through their bass amp. And yeah, we now have this, like you said, that 90s college alternative playlist. We're writing our own songs, and yeah, we enjoy it. We get together, weekly rehearsals, a couple of hours every week on Thursday nights. Once Comicazi shuts down, we go down there and we rehearse. And that's the joy of an Eisner Award-winning comic book retailer that reaches out to the community, is that all the creative people gravitate there, and all the people who love comic books, and all people who love playing instruments. You all find each other. You find your tribe. We all get together. And, you know, now Bob and I are business partners. He's a guy I used to play chess with. He's a guy I used to play poker with. And now we make comic books together, and we play in bands together. And, you know, like, I'm very thankful that he's in my life, and that I get to do all these cool things together with a very cool partner.
Very cool. Do you guys still play chess on like the chess apps on your phone and whatnot from a distance?
I play on chess apps. I think we're probably sick of seeing each other at this point. We don't need to play chess with each other as well.
Don't need another connection throughout every day.
I think we all play chess individually, and we pursue that interest with other folks. But like, I see Bob a lot, and we're in constant contact. And you know, it's great to find. You know, that's a joy of collaboration. Is stuff you don't have to do all the heavy lifting yourself.
Right.
And, you know, what more could I ask for than a guy with an Eisner Award as best comic book retailer on the planet? Like, that's a good guy to have on your side. And so, you know, it's great. I like making comics, but it's even more fun when you make comics with other cool people. And you get to share the experience, and it's not just you, but it's all the other people who like making comics too and do a great job doing it. And that's really the most rewarding aspect of the entire process.
Awesome. And last thing for you, Roel, one
Yes,
thing I
sir.
did do when I read through Frankenrocker and the Jailbait Punks,
Yeah.
on that very first splash page where you introduce the entire cast, you say which each of the girls' favorite band is.
Yeah.
And so I went and found those bands and listened to them while I was listening to it. Grass is totally my jam. I love that band now. That is really cool. But the one I couldn't find is the Nemores, or is that, I couldn't even find any information when I Google searched them. Are they super local, or?
So the Nemores it's just an anagram for the Ramones.
Oh, son of a bitch. Okay. That's what. But when there was no
it's funny. I
information, I'm
thought
like, is
that
this
when
made
I
up?
first
What's
saw
going
the
on?
word, and then I just put it out of my mind.
So you know, like, you don't want to be too obvious about, like,
Of course.
I love the Ramones. God bless the Ramones. They're a great band, and I love their music. And you know, that had that on like repeat, like heavy playlist. And so that the Morris, you will not find them, but if you just rearrange the letters, it's just an anagram. And go put on your favorite Ramones record, and you can listen to all the different bands that the girls love.
Perfect. All right, guys. That is Frankenrocker and the Jailbait Punks. Bad Kids Press, by the way, just as a quick, also Roel does Katie Black Dragon, also by Bad Kids Press. If you want something a little more pulp classic sci-fi in that realm, so that's another one I highly recommend. That's up to issue 3 now, and that's just an ongoing one, right? So far,
yeah, that's the plan. It's like we've got 8 issues in production. Like, we have 8 issues of it done, and you know, the 3rd one has come out. It's just ongoing, and it's easier to make it an ongoing as opposed to my other projects, because we just get a different artist with each issue, and you know, that's a different production publication model. Like, yeah, for Frankenrocker and the Jailbait Punks, you're like, I am going to ask for years of Lukasz's life, and that's a heavy.
So you gotta put a limit on that. You gotta put a cutoff.
Gotta put a limit. And it's also hard to find artists who can fulfill that. I've had so many artists I start working with, and then the heavy lifting shows up, and then they disappear, and I don't blame them. And they're like, listen, man, you wrote a 120-page script, and I did 70 of those pages, but I can't do the last 50 or whatever. Something, you know, that's not what actually happens. But like, it's very difficult to plot out one artist who's going to do multiple issues over several years and be dependable, and you know, expect that the project will be seen through to completion. So Katie Black Dragon, I basically adopted the same model 2000 AD does with Judge Dredd, which is you just rotate your creative teams, and like, that's expected, and you have a new artist for every arc. And I was like, look, Katie Black Dragon, I understand his character. They're going to be self-contained single issues and new artists every time. And like, you know, they can all bring their interpretations to it. Just the same way different artists will draw Spider-Man and Batman differently. Like, as long as it still has a general look at a character, everyone recognizes that's who the character is. So Katie Black Dragon is ongoing because I can get 8 different artists to draw 8 different issues, and that's something that can be self-sustaining and keep going.
Cool. Great. All right. Jeez. Thank you so much, Roel. We're bordering on 2 hours, so I think it's a good place to let you go. But amazing to talk with you. Amazing to meet you. I'm sure this won't be the last time we talk, but thank you so much for all the comics, the work, and the wine. I am so thrilled that you guys exist. I'm so thrilled about everything you're doing. So yeah, cannot wait for more.
Thanks, Dallas. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it for taking the time to talk to me. This was great. Look forward to talking to you guys again. And yeah, this was a fun interview. So thanks for the support, and look forward to seeing what you guys do with your YouTube channel and all the videos you produce.
Oh, thanks.
Perfect. All right, guys, signing off for now. Thanks for watching.